TBCN presents Creating Your Own Job, a new series aimed at providing you with resources and assistance to start your own business. Financial assistance, analyzing the marketplace, marketing strategies, implementing the plan, creating your own job.
Hi, and welcome again to Creating Your Own Job, a series devoted to bringing in experts to help you if you're starting a company or growing your company. Today we're going to be talking about hiring staff and how best to do that. And we very fortunately have with us experts in that field. And first we have Jim Good, who's a supervisor in teacher recruitment and application center in Hillsborough County Public Schools, our largest employer in Hillsborough County, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome, Jim. Glad you could be here. Dean Pappas with the Law Office of Constantine W. Pappas, PA, here in town, who is an attorney that specializes in employment law.
That's correct.
Oh, glad you could come. Dan Danisco, who's a senior vice president with Robert Half, here in town. We're glad you could be here. And Rebecca Luckban, who is HR Field Service Manager with Oasis Outsourcing. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the recruitment center at Hillsborough County Schools.
Thank you, Lisa. What I manage is the application center as well as the recruitment office. We're looking obviously through the recruitment to recruit the best instructional professionals we can. We also manage the application center, which deals with about 25,000 applications a year. Anything from administrative, guidance counselor, instructional professionals, as well as support staff. So we have a small staff that deals with a lot of work.
You get 25,000 applications a year?
Per year, yes, ma'am.
For generally how many openings, could I ask?
We hired last year a little over 1,300 teachers, instructional professionals, and we hired about 400 to 500 support staff.
Tremendous. Dean, tell me about your practice.
Well, I have an employment practice. I represent primarily plaintiffs, employees who have problems with their employers. I also provide advice to employers on occasion who have problems with employees. And my job really is to see if there's some way that we can resolve disputes between the employees and the employers short of litigation. If that litigation is necessary, then I'm a trial lawyer, and I'll attempt to the best that I can to get the case resolved short of litigation, but if litigation is necessary, then that's where we go.
Dan?
So headquartered here in Tampa, Robert Half International, we're about a $4 billion specialized staffing firm. So we have 7 divisions internationally: place, accounting, finance, technology, office support, and legal professionals, both on a temporary and a full-time and consulting basis. So I'm glad to be here today because usually I'm on the road Monday to Thursday, so I was happy to be in town to join you today.
Your territory is everywhere?
I travel domestically to all our major markets in North America.
From California on?
From California on, yes.
Wow. Rebecca, tell me about Oasis.
I work for Oasis Outsourcing. They are a professional employer organization, which is a PEO. Basically, we provide, it's a business entity that provides services to clients and through using outsourcing, through co-employment relationships. With a co-employment relationships, basically the PEO acts as the employer of administrative services, and the client acts as the employer of the worksite employees. So the client would actually retain the control over the worksite employees, and we would handle all of the administrative duties. So we handle HR, workers' comp, benefits, risk development, and payroll. So we are able to help small organizations to offer other services that they may not be able to offer as a small employer.
Generally small employers, although you use large ones too.
We do a variety. We really do target small to mid-sized companies, and then we also, as they grow, we're able to take and develop with them and help. I have some clients that are from anywhere from 700 to 800 worksite employees. And then I also have small, 5 to 10 worksite employees. So we try to help all different sizes and different industries as well.
I'm going to go, Jim, and ask you, with 25,000 applicants, and what did you say, about 1,500?
We hired
Or
about a little
last
over
year?
1,300 teachers last year.
How do you decide, out of all those people, who ought to be hired? What helps you make that decision?
Got
This
it.
is for people who are thinking of hiring right now here, so you're giving advice to our viewers about how are those decisions made?
It's understanding the structure and the philosophy of each individual public school district. In Florida, the school districts are individualized counties. We're the 8th largest public school district in the nation. We've got, like I said, 25,000 employees. The Human Resource Department does not hire the personnel. That's a site-based function or the function of the individual department with a vacancy. We merely facilitate the onboarding and the actual vetting of the application to be sure that people actually qualify for a particular position. Once the department of the vacancy, the school or the department with a vacancy sees the particular application is activated for a particular set of vacancies or skill set, at that point they can interview and offer employment to the most qualified.
You said vetting.
Correct. In other words, certain jobs have certain requirements.
And that's gotten to be a big deal with the school board, has it not?
Well, it has, and it should be, because you want the best in front of your children, especially when it comes to teachers or even working as support staff. You want people that meet certain criteria, whether it be a teacher that has to be able to hold or be eligible for a professional teaching certificate, or a custodian who's working in a school site. There are certain criteria that they must be vetted for before they're allowed to work with children.
And so for the viewer, if they're whatever field they're creating their business in, they need to look at whether the credentials are there for the different jobs that they're doing, essentially what you're saying.
The same thing, even in a small business or medium or large business, there are certain items that you should look at, target, and if you're looking to hire people, you need to hire those that fit that skill set that you're looking for.
Now, with teachers these days, the principal makes the decision, right?
Correct. That's
when you said
we have
the on-site people.
Correct. We have about 250 school sites, just under, counting our ancillary sites, and they absolutely do make the hiring decision because they're also held accountable for that. As the teacher progresses in his or her career field, how well they do their job also reflects on the principal. So yes, indeed, they do hire the best that they can.
Rebecca, as a client of Oasis, our company, our nonprofit is, I know that Oasis provides vetting sorts of functions like checking resumes and these kinds of, to make sure the background is as someone stated it.
We have a Oasis staff sourcing, which is another division that actually will help to assist on the recruiting end of it. So as a PEO, we can actually help provide different forms and give you guidance on how to set those up, maybe offer job descriptions, and creating those, really kind of narrowing down and analyzing what the position actually is before you start the recruiting. So we would probably take it back just a little bit further before you actually went out and started getting the various jobs out there, really asking what does the job need to do, and then kind of setting those up with a job description and then posting it for the recruitment. And then our subsidiary would be Oasis Staff Sourcing would actually be able to provide the recruiting piece of it. They could either, set the resume out or set the ad out and then kind of review the resumes and provide it that way, or they could just offer you the best candidates that are available. So it really depends.
Yeah. As I recall, Robert Half himself wrote a number of books, right, on hiring?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the company was founded by Bob Half in 1948, and he was really a legend in the industry. He had this idea about specialized employment and started placing accountants in New York City. People thought he was crazy to specialize, but then wrote a number of books, and this was way before EEOC was even in existence. And that's really where he led from kind of a foundation with ethics in the industry. At one point, he was the largest employer for the New York Times, and actually boycotted putting classified ads in because you could, back then, you could put ads in that were discriminatory. And
Oh, really?
he led that movement away from discriminatory practices in the employment industry.
Is that not legal now? You can't, I mean, it's actually a law. You
Yeah,
can't,
it's actually, I mean,
can't
like I said,
say
this
I want a male or a
male
female.
or female, you know, just like I said, this predates EEOC, and he really led that movement. So obviously pretty proud to work for a company that he founded.
Dan, if you could condense some of his advice on hiring down to a couple of important.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. The saying in the industry is, you know, kind of don't rely on the resume per se at face value. People are perfect twice in their life, the day they're born and the day they write their resume. It's kind of how we go by. So while that might be the foundation, it's like you don't rely on that. What I mean by that is, you know, you should verify educational credentials. Assuming the skills are there, verified by reference checking as part of the vetting process. Then, really, the most important thing is not on paper, it's the cultural fit. Because if you've done a good job vetting on skill set, typically people are not successful in jobs because they don't fit the corporate culture. So you want to go step way back before you get into the hiring process. Do you actually realize who's going to be successful in your environment and what it takes to be successful?
Do you get, Dean, clients who didn't get hired and they think it's a discriminatory kind
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, lots of times. In a lot of cases, and especially for your viewers, if they're small businesses and they're just starting up, it doesn't become too much of an issue. The EEOC under Title, which regulates Title VII, which prevents discrimination against race, age, gender, disability, and a number of different factors, only really comes into play if you have 15 or more employees. Age discrimination is a matter that comes into play only if you have 20 or more employees. So
I better get some folks in here then.
So for a small employer, that only has 5 or 6 employees, it's. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that they can come in and ask an employee, if they're married, which you can't, how old they are, which you can't. But there really isn't an avenue for that employee to take his grievance if the employer, asks those kinds of questions. Now, if you have more than 15 employees, then you're fair game. And sure, I've had cases where people felt that they weren't hired because of their age. And right now, with the sort of the percentage of older people unemployed, that's becoming probably one of the hottest areas in employment law. The fact is that there are just more retirees who try to go back into the workforce and can't, and they generally feel that they're not being hired because of their age.
Think it's true?
I have a sense that it probably is. It's very hard to prove. The Supreme Court recently issued a decision which makes it very difficult to prove age discrimination. I mean, it almost has to be the sole and the but-for reason why a person wasn't hired or why they were discharged if they were employed and they were let go. Whereas the other decisions, I mean, the other areas, gender, race, age, things that are not so much age but disability, they're a little more flexible in the reasons. If it's part of the reason, then you can have a claim. But in age, it has to be really the sole reason. That's very hard to prove unless somebody says, and believe me, there are employers that will, constantly make comments about an elder employee, like you're really not as quick as you used to be, or we're trying to, there was a case up in Atlanta recently where I represented a woman who was, she was 50, and she worked as a sales rep, and she was very attractive, very successful, and there was a new manager that was brought in, and he was in his mid-30s, and he told her straight up, he says, I think I really need younger people, and funny thing is she didn't even know she had a claim until she talked to a friend of mine who referred her to me, and she had a very good claim, and that was the kind of thing where you've got direct evidence of discrimination. But most employers are not that sophisticated. They are a little more sophisticated than that. They will
Document other things.
They'll find other reasons that, that the employee is, they'll put them on a performance improvement plan, or they might, all of a sudden start, putting comments in their performance evaluations that, that they weren't there earlier. So age cases are tough. And my advice is, if you're employing someone, that when you bring them in, I mean, you don't even ask them their date of birth, you don't ask them where they've been born, you don't ask them if they're married, you don't ask them, if they're planning to have children. I mean, there's just a whole litany of questions that you can ask, because later on they could be interpreted as, well, he was really trying to get at, some protected area.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing, Dan, people describe your clients, the companies, will describe what their needs are, don't they?
Correct.
And would they, even though, I mean, you have laws that we can't advertise in a certain way, do they ask about age?
Generally not. I mean, what they'll typically ask is skill set and functionally, this is what this person needs to perform. Now, when you look at, kind of our generation, the baby boomers, sometimes it's more challenging to get the job because you haven't kept up with the skill sets, technology in particular. So, is it the age, or is it the fact that you just don't have the skill? And what we find is, again, it depends on what function needs to be done every day. And if you have those hands-on skills, they're going to hire the best person. Right? But again, that gets down to the cultural fit. For a lot of the viewers that are in the smaller companies and growing, they need people that are really hands-on and doers, regardless of prior titles, regardless of prior experience level. I mean, can they get on and do an Excel spreadsheet, for example? Do they have the technology savvy? With social media today, you almost cannot be in business without social media. So, our generation was kind of the last to get on. I mean, anything I need, my son's 25, I call him, it's how do you do this, right? And without a manual, without anything, he figures out the smartphone applications, and it's
That's
just a
why we have
necessity.
them, isn't it? I mean, frankly, my 4-year-old granddaughter, I was showing her some pictures on my iPhone, and I was pressing the arrow to go to the next picture, and she said, Nona, took the thing and just did that business. I'm like, hey, if you get any free time, Riley, maybe you'll show me how to use the other functions on this phone. I mean, I'm just amazed at young people and their ability to do this.
I was just going to make a statement on that, but if you go back to that job description that we were talking about.
I was going to ask you that, yes.
It helps you to remain compliant because it takes the discriminatory piece out of it, because you are trying to find a particular person or individual that has that skill set. So let's say you find 3 or 4 individuals that have all the qualifications, they interview, and we would walk through a step with this. But let's say, for instance, you wanted to do the cultural piece. Once they have all of the criteria that you're looking for, then you can determine if they would be a cultural fit or not.
How can you? How do you really know that? To me, that
because you know your own
hardest
culture, you know your the people that are in that in your environment, and you can take and maybe you have somebody that's not so detail oriented, or and you need that for that position because that's just the way it works best in your industry. You can pick the best candidate out of those 4 individuals, but the job description is going to be able to get you to that step that's going to keep you compliant, where you're not asking questions that are all over the place. And we also provide a variety of training on whether it's interviewing. Maybe you have your managers or whoever's going to come in, like a small organization's just starting up and they have 3 people that are actually going to be interviewing. You can provide training for them to know what they shouldn't be asking, what they should ask. Should it be a structured interview? What do you do once you have your job description? There's a series of questions that you should ask. Ask them all. All the candidates should be asked all the questions. It may veer off a little bit, but you're still asking basically the same things from each individual.
Right.
Jim, you have a million cultures out there, don't you?
Absolutely.
If you've got schools in every neighborhood in this town.
Correct. We have about 250 school sites and, of course, multiple ancillary departments. But I did want to join in what she was saying. The job description is a driving force. They have to be updated. They have to meet industry standards to keep the employer out of trouble. But I think you just touched upon something quite important, that we've trained our administrators to be very careful when you're interviewing and you've chosen your group to be interviewed. To level the playing field, you have to ask very similar questions to the entire group. You can't vary and do softball, hardball. You have to make sure that your questions are similar. But also, we have, to identify that cultural skill set, we have a set of pre-screeners we use for instructional professionals as well as our administrators. I'm not plugging it, but it's something that we use. It's something that's kind of a national benchmark. It's a Haberman pre-screener for teachers as well as administrators. And it does identify certain strengths and weaknesses. It really does dissect the applicant. But we also caution our employers, our administrators who have that vacancy, that it's simply a tool.
Right.
Your interview is the key. You really have to know that gut feeling that you have. When you interview and you've asked those questions and you have that face-to-face, you'll know the right person for the particular vacancy you have. Will they match that climate and culture? Because they may have the skill set, although crash and burn. They may have the best skill set, but they'll crash and burn at your particular site. They really have to be that fit so that they can move forward and be successful.
Right.
So much of culture to me is you can have people with really fantastic skill sets, but they clash with other people in your place. And how do you avoid that? That, to me,
We actually provide a series of, and DISC is another assessment.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can't use it just by itself, but
Absolutely.
you may determine someone's a little more extroverted or introverted, and maybe I have an accounting position that I don't want them wandering all over the building talking to everyone, and I have a candidate that's extroverted, which is somebody who has no problem getting up and speaking in front of individuals. I may want somebody who's a little more introverted, and when I start looking at assessments, out of my 4 candidates that I've selected that have all the qualifications, I may find 2 of them are extroverts, and so that narrows it down to 2 other individuals that may be a better fit for that particular position or in the culture that's there. So then I can start looking and maybe, I don't want to say nitpicking, but I can be a little bit more picky or choosy as to they may have 5 years more experience, one candidate than the other. So I may not require it, but I may look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to take the person with the most experience.
Let me just add, once you make these decisions, because I think the issue you have is, how does how do you integrate the culture of all these different applicants, and then once they're hired, how do you keep a harmonious employment place? Well, probably the most important document that we look at is the policies and procedures manual that the employer has. And I don't care how big you are or how small you are, you really should, every employer should have a policies and procedures manual. And have every employee who's hired sign it, acknowledge that they received it, that they read it. Because what that'll do is that'll protect the employer from claims that someone felt they were discriminated against, that they're being harassed, and if there's a complaint procedure in the policy and the employer doesn't follow it, well, the employer has some protection there. Similarly, you should have a progressive discipline methodology, where you have an oral warning, maybe a written warning, maybe a suspension. But that's a very important document for an employer to have, and they're available. I mean, you can pretty much find them anywhere.
As you can have a customized handbook, and to your point, you need to follow it if you have
Right.
it, but you also need to make sure that the employees are signing it. So then, if anything does come up, you have that documentation that you have provided to them, and you can use that.
And I think a lot of it does get flushed out if you're consistent with the questions, and the questions get in. History repeats itself. So by asking very specific questions, people are on their best behavior during the interview process. So, are you a hard worker? Do you have a hard work ethic? Well,
Who's gonna say
Who's going
no?
to say no to that, right?
example.
So give me an example, this last environment you were in, okay? Whether it's, working under pressure. Give me an example of when you had a deadline. How did you handle it? If you're looking for the intercommunication skills, okay? When something came up, could have been a little bit combative or controversial, how did you handle that? And make them give you specific examples. Then you turn back to the references and try to validate, same type of similar answers. But the key is, like we brought up earlier, is if your questions are consistent and you have everybody on a level playing field after they do that first pass, typically you could vet it out.
What should you be looking for when someone says, when the interviewer asks the question, which I know is often asked, tell me your strengths and your weaknesses?
It's one of my favorite questions.
Isn't it? Oh, I just work too darn hard. That's the
Right.
problem with me.
I'm a perfectionist.
There you go, another one, which we don't always like.
Right.
Yeah.
But okay, go ahead, you give me your
I love that
take on
question
it.
because it really tells you if the person has studied the particular job that they're interviewing for, if they've bothered to do that. Many don't, you'd be so surprised. But they come in to interview cold. Others come in very well prepared. And they know this, say, well, although this is not my strength, I've seen that the job responsibilities on the job description, for example, include this. You see someone who's a go-getter. They know that, okay, this is not necessarily my best strength, but I know how to learn that. I'm your guy.
Right.
I'm your person. And that's important because that may fit that need that you have very importantly. I want to touch on the reference section, though. I think that's very important. Right now, we're constrained as a public school entity to actually check references. If we don't, it's an issue for us. So we actually have to check references. The past immediate instructional administrator who's supervised that person has to give a reference on that by law. But really, our principals are well trained to ask questions, and sometimes it's not just what they hear, it's what they don't hear. Because you're really not allowed to volunteer a lot of information by public law. Sometimes you can only give dates of employment. Employed, they did this job from this date to this date, that's all I can say. But
You're talking about the reference. Not
correct,
being
on that
able
reference
to.
checking. The reference can't actually say anything else other than the former employer can't say much other than
That's
they
what
were
I do.
employed. Yeah, exactly. And I understand because legally it's an issue, but unfortunately we're dealing with people and we have to ask a series of questions, not just about their absenteeism, but about their character, about dealing with kids. Would you re-employ them? So sometimes we don't get answers to those questions, and that's just as valuable as what you do here.
Or the voice intonation when they answer the question.
Absolutely, and our principals know they have to check.
Right.
The actual person who does the hiring, the offer of employment, does the checking in our school district.
I think also another important thing to have is the application, because a lot of times people come in with their resume, and your resume you're not signing. So I can hand you anything, and it lists, I've done all these XYZ jobs. And
Sometimes doesn't have dates on it
it
because it's
doesn't
a
have
functional
anything.
resume.
Right, but if you have the application, they're actually signing off and they're listing it. So what you'd want to do is, sometimes people draw a line through it and say, see resume. You give them back their application and ask them to fill it out, because if they put anything that's falsified on the application and sign it, and then you do a reference check and find out later that it's false, it's very easy to terminate them because they've signed that it is valid, that the information that they're putting on the application. So I can lie on the resume and I don't have any document that says that it was actually valid. But if I have the application, you can't argue with that. You've
Can't
signed.
say it was a typo or
Correct.
something like that.
You actually filled it
I
out.
want to hear more about that, but we're going to take just a quick break, and we'll be back. Please stay tuned in. See you in a minute.
Job seekers, you can upload your resume, view job postings, and research labor market information at employflorida.com.
I'm Candy Olson, Chair of the Hillsborough County Public Schools. You're watching the Tampa Bay Community Network.
Welcome back to Creating Your Own Job. Today we've been talking about hiring the right people. I'm Louise Thompson from Tampa Bay Community Network, where you can learn how to do video and TV production and have your own program yourself right on television and the internet. With us has been, and will continue to be, Jim Good from the Hillsborough County School Board, employment attorney Dean Pappas, Dan Denisco from Robert Half, and Rebecca Luckban from Oasis Outsourcing. So we were talking about filling out an application and how important it is for people to create one that's proper. Do you ever get lawsuits, Dean, with regard to applications being?
You know where they come up mostly if an employee has been terminated. And the first thing that the employer should do after they terminated an employee, and if this employee feels that they were terminated for an illegal reason, is to check their resources, check their application, check their resume, because there's something called the after acquired evidence theory, which means that if you had a reason to fire the person while they were employed for, say, putting false information on their application or improper information on their resume, then that's a very good defense. In other words, I would have fired him anyway. So that's the context in which I see it mostly. Of course, employees, when they're trying to apply for a job or they need consultation about particular questions on the application, my advice is always just tell the truth. Comes up a lot with
Reason for leaving?
well with
If
younger
like if
people.
you were terminated or something from a job and you're looking at you're filling out an application, it says
Right.
they can put that down, right?
Sure.
The
Yeah.
employer can put down
Yeah.
reason for leaving.
Right. You have to answer it truthfully. Same thing with people in their 30s and 40s that maybe did something that they shouldn't have done when they were 16 and they were arrested. It's a juvenile defense. Unless their record's been expunged, they really should put it in, because again, it can come up as a reason for justifying a termination that the employee may think was illegal.
This is really difficult with the school board, isn't it?
It certainly is. I was just thinking of a way to jump in. Unfortunately, with the public entities, our applicants many times confused when they get advice. Sometimes it's not the best. They're told by their lawyers if it's sealed and expunged, you don't have to say it. And that is true for private employment. Unfortunately, for public employment, due to the state law here, we do see everything as a public employer. Even if it's sealed or expunged, we do have access to what the charges are. And it does play a factor to whether the person can actually become employed eventually with us. We have a terminology for when they don't disclose it. It's the failure to disclose, and that is grounds. There are grounds for immediate termination.
What do you advise an employer that when you're doing advice for employers as far as the application is concerned, do you advise them to ask for more data than you would tell an employee to fill out? Or if you're talking to an employer and he's putting together his application for employment, what would you...
It depends on the type of job they're looking for. If it's a teacher, certainly someone who was going to be working with children, you'd want to have criminal, you'd want to ask questions about a criminal background. If it's a construction job of some sort, you'd want to put information in there about, prior injuries that an employee might have had, or, anything that might prevent him from being able to perform the job. So it really is industry specific. I don't think that there's a template necessarily for, these are the questions you should ask.
But the questions really need to be targeted to what position you're hiring for. So, for instance, if you didn't need to have the construction for their health, or if they've had injuries prior, we would probably stick with like a driver's license. If somebody doesn't need to have a driver's license, if they're not going to be a driver, we wouldn't ask them for that. But if you have a position that requires them to drive, they need to have a valid driver's license in order to drive.
The minute you get a driver's license, now you know their age.
Well, you're not asking them to see the driver's license. You're just asking if they have a valid driver's license. If I have a job that requires you to drive, I need to make sure that you have a valid driver's license, and I probably will pull the record to see if you have it, if you're hired.
Right. Okay. Do you, as a recruitment company for people, do you have a separate application besides whatever application you're being provided by the client?
It depends on what division. So for the temporary and consulting employees, they're actually our employees on our payroll. So we have an application for them. On a referral basis.
Oh, they're employed by you, and
yes,
then you
we assign
loan them out.
So it's basically a loan staff, but they're paid by Robert Half International. So they fill out our application. The only time some clients will want, depending on confidentiality, they may want a non-disclosure statement signed or something along those lines. But the application is ours because they're our employees. Okay. On the full-time direct placement, we have an application. And then typically, as we refer them into the client's going to go through the whole interview process, hiring process, and they'll fill out an external application at the client site as well.
Is there, since we're talking to people about hiring, is there an advantage to people who are starting or expanding their business in taking on temporary employees versus going for a permanent employee?
There could be, depending on how organized you are with your business plan. And by that I mean, do you really know from an infrastructure standpoint how's it all going to lay out? And as you look 6-9 months down the road, are you going to have a need for full-time employees? Or are you in a growth mode where maybe you need 5 or 6 people today, and in 6 months, 8 months down the road, maybe that ends up, maybe 1 or 2 of them are going to stay. So it's really case by case. A lot of employers feel they want to go with the full-time hire, but also depending on their past history, it gives them an opportunity to almost, test drive a little bit. Things that we had talked about earlier, fitting into the environment, seeing do they have the work ethic and are they who you thought they were throughout the interview process. Over a 90-day period, you'll find out who that real person is. So it could be an advantage. And again, I think that depends on the field. Accounting and finance, right now, it's certainly in every market I travel to, unemployment is more than half of what you're hearing on a national basis. Unemployment for IT audit professionals, for example, it's about 3% in every market, not the 9%. So if you have a need,
Really?
oh, absolutely.
Is it just that we're, well, when we get that number, we're not taking into account different specific fields, is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Because I've heard, I think I was talking to an architect 6 months ago, and he said our unemployment is like close to 20%.
Correct.
Is that
Look at Florida, where latest numbers are 9% overall as a state.
Right.
Accounting and finance is about 4.5%. Technology is a little bit less than that, but construction unemployment is probably still in the 20s. So it really depends by the industry and again the skill set you're looking for. It'd be a lot more difficult to hire in one field versus another on that temporary basis. So if you put numbers to it, if you're looking for an accounting person, not that our temporary or consultants are bad by any means, especially Florida is very transient. They may have just moved down from another state. But if unemployment's 4.5% and you want to hire somebody temporarily, you're eliminating 96% of the population that's working in that field.
Oh, true.
So you're seeing a much smaller pool to select from. Okay? And again, not that they're bad people or they may be damaged goods, but wouldn't you rather have both available to you as an option, and then you can pick the best person?
You're bringing up for me and I've seen newspapers reports on this, a idea that there may be discrimination against people who did lose their job. Mm-hmm. Is it, you've seen this?
I probably read the same articles you have.
Yeah, is that, did they make that like a law or something? They were going to propose that you cannot?
They're proposing it. It's not a law yet.
Seems kind of crazy though, to make a law out of that, but what's your view?
Well, I think part of it is it's an attempt to deal with the age issue that we talked about earlier. As I said, it's very difficult to prove age discrimination. Most of the people that are not being hired are over 40. I mean, most of them in their 50s and early 60s, and maybe Bob could even opine on this, but it's my understanding that people who have been out of work for maybe 6 months to a year, some companies won't even interview them.
Right.
Correct.
And I think it's an attempt to address that issue, because I think that's, there's a stigma.
You think that's a tricky way of just saying, I don't want to deal with older people?
Mm-hmm,
because since older people were let go first, is that right? Or is it some other reason?
Yeah, no,
if you've been out of work this long, I don't want to deal with people.
And I'd say if we go back pre this latest downturn, there was definitely a stigma. Okay, I think it's been softened a little bit because this downturn was so long and so deep. I mean, some really good people became victim of layoffs,
right,
regardless of skill set, regardless of tenure and
you
experience.
You could be a great employee.
People just cut very deep.
Yeah.
So depending on who's on the other side of the table interviewing you, there's people who were clients of ours. Now they're back into hiring mode. They're a little bit more sympathetic because they were in that position. Right?
Oh, okay.
And they can empathize with that. 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say it was definitely true that they wouldn't even look through our full-time group. There's a term, fee eligible. Well, part of being fee eligible is that you were gainfully employed, because clients figured, well, if they're unemployed, I'll find them. Now, I would debate that obviously in the field I'm in, but that's the stigma that was there, and they would not pay a fee unless you could produce somebody who was gainfully employed. Okay? That's changed pretty dramatically, like I say, because of the downturn.
They actually made them not eligible for you to collect a fee for a recruitment?
Well, they would say, you know, don't refer anybody to me unless they're gainfully employed, right? Because if I'm going to pay you a finder's fee, okay, why would I do that if I could put an ad and they'll probably respond to my ad? Like I say, we could debate that all day long.
Yeah,
because I think
okay.
we'd still find better people, whether they're employed or unemployed, and do they have the time to do that? But that's kind of, there's a mentality out there that if I'm paying a fee for a referral, that they're gainfully employed.
Okay.
We've
Did you
seen that
wanna
change
add
dramatically, though.
Do you want to add to any of this discussion?
The age discrimination issue, I don't think really applies in the school district. We do look at the application to ask when the last time they were employed. When we see a gap, it is valid to question that. But normally there are valid reasons. Their spouse has left, they're raising a family, they wanted to do something with their children, now they want to come back and they want to recertify. So I think that is something that is worthwhile asking. Sometimes it can be used to say, well, you know,
Right.
you really didn't do a very good job when you were last. That's probably why you left, and now you want to come back to us. But I think in the teaching profession and a school district, generally speaking, that's not a problem.
And I think it is industry and skill specific, because think about if you're out of technology for 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
You're behind.
You are way behind, as opposed.
You know, that scares the heck out of my daughters-in-law, who are, you know, savvy in technology. Just staying home with the child is going to kill me in the long run because I'll be out of sync with whatever's happening, or they'll think so,
Right.
even if I kept up with it. It's true that not.
Definitely.
I think for a small employer, though, if you're, I think with training, you help people to not discriminate against age or, and I mean, I know it's still out there, but if we're getting with small employers, they can learn how not to discriminate to other individuals, you know, and really start looking at their skill sets. I think it's real important that we do provide the training and that others do learn how to interview, because I think it's important not to look at, maybe it is in one industry, but I know we offer as a service e-learning training within the organization. So a small employer could actually hire somebody if they didn't have all the qualifications and they found somebody and they couldn't find any, let's say they couldn't find a particular skill set, they could have some e-learning training that would be a requirement of the job once
That
they
would
get
bring
in.
them up right
That
up
would
to
bring them up to
speed.
speed. So there's things
Quickly.
that you can do to kind of change.
And you know, since we've saying all this, and as somebody who actually could qualify very easily, and I often think, because when I read this, you know, so many people are not, have chosen, are not on unemployment any longer. They're giving up. Somebody's making that assumption. I always think if I were unemployed right now, I would just go get my Social Security benefits because I'm entitled to them. So while I don't need them now, I'm letting them just, you know, accumulate or become at a higher amount. I want to say that there's tremendous advantages to having learned as much as I have with my years of experience now. Don't all of you think that? An older person may not be as quick with certain things, or lifting heavy things, or getting up on a ladder, and these kinds of things that are more dangerous. But isn't there an advantage to some people looking at the person who would be grateful to have a job, who may be older and can't find one?
I mean, not only grateful, but could be a real asset, again, depending on where you are as an organization. I mean, there may be some big value in having somebody, if you're in a really growth mode and it's kind of a helter-skelter environment, to have somebody that's business maturity, that's been there, done that before, could be a real mentoring program almost for, you know, the Generation X and Y, if you will, coming up, who haven't seen anything like that before. So again, it's all situational, you know, it's really, it's hard to say, here's the secret formula to build your infrastructure appropriately. You really have to look at where you are and where you want to go, and then what resources are necessary to get you there. And, you know, certain times it's going to be not age, but it's, you know, certain business maturity is going to be necessary. if it's kind of helter-skelter, depending on your compensation plan.
I was just going to
Okay.
say that. Yeah.
I mean, what situation are they in where, you know, at this point in my career, we talked about it earlier, I thought about, you know, going into teaching where fortunately compensation isn't the #1 priority for me. So maybe you get more talent for less of an investment, somebody that's in that situation. If you have an incentive-based compensation plan, generally somebody coming right out of school is going to take more of a shot at something like that than somebody who has a career of, you know, X amount of earnings and needs that from a lifestyle. So that's why it's so hard to have a, this is the rule kind of a thing.
You know, just anecdotally, I mean, there is, you know, we've all probably read that the teenagers have an awful time finding jobs now, especially during the summer.
Too many tattoos.
Maybe
I'm making a
maybe.
joke.
And
Okay.
piercings.
But one of the reasons is, and I have a client down in Miami who has a number of, you know, like fast food franchises, Subways and Marathons, things like that. And he said, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, if he hired somebody and they could get 5 cents more an hour, you know, going to work for Arby's, you know, they wouldn't even give notice. He says, but what's happening now is that the older workers who have kind of been out of the workforce are falling into these jobs and they're not leaving them. So consequently, they're filling up all these positions that, you know, I mean, a guy that's, you know, maybe an IT executive that's been out of the market for a few years, finally realizes, he says, I'm not getting back into that market. That 6-figure salary is never coming back. But he still needs something to, you know, to help him with his bills, so he'll take a job at a Publix or and he won't leave, and they'll be fantastic employees.
Wow. And that's causing
And that's
problem
causing
for the younger.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really kind of amazing. I wanted to ask you, and maybe it's because I have, in recent years, had read this with the school board, but I know there are people who could be whistleblowers. And if you're in the position of hiring and there's anything that you're doing that could be interpreted poorly by somebody, I guess, and somebody stood up for that, there would be a question of...
Well, there's a public employees whistleblower section.
and that's only for public?
Well, there's a public and a private.
Okay.
But generally, the private it's pretty Byzantine. I mean, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. But basically, it's if you're an employee and you see that there's some kind of a violation of what's called a law, rule, or a regulation, and you bring it to your supervisor's attention. Typically, you should do it in writing, and that you're retaliated against for doing that. Then you have a claim. Now, I've never had a situation where someone wasn't hired by a school district, say school district B, because school district, they filed a whistleblower complaint when they were working for school district A. But I don't know that necessarily would be a cause of action. I don't know that they would actually be able to bring a suit like that. I mean, employers have a lot of leeway in terms of who they want to hire, and if they don't want to hire somebody who they perceived as being a troublemaker in a different district, then I think that they would probably be entitled to do that, as long as it wasn't illegal. In other words, if they terminated someone who brought a whistleblower claim in their district, if there's somebody else that, if it's the same person but came from someone else where he was causing trouble, that's why a lot of times,
People don't pursue things then.
People don't
because they
pursue
know
things.
that. If I say something, what about overtime? Let me ask you that one. What
Well, that's-
about people who don't, it seems like Florida is a place that there's a lot of, or so it seems to me anyway, don't pay overtime to employees who are actually eligible for it.
Right.
And I've been seeing recently one of the law firms advertising that now on, but I know, you walk into a 7-Eleven or something, excuse me, I shouldn't use the name, but you walk into a convenience store of some kind and the kid says, you look tired, you say, and they say, yeah, I'm really tired, I've been on for 12 hours because somebody didn't relieve me, and I say something like, well, then you're racking up overtime, and they say, I'm not allowed overtime, and I think, I think that would be wrong.
You would be
But
right to say that.
I tell them, go, you better go look up some stuff at the Department of Labor and see if that, and now I'm finally seeing some advertising about this. What about that as a?
Well, a few years ago, it was a huge area, because there was ran across the country, really, huge lawsuits. And the way it breaks down is the employer, and then if you have a small company, what people would do is they say, well, I'm going to give you a salary. I'm going to pay you, $40,000 a year, and you're going to be the executive vice president, or give them a big title. But really, all they are is a secretary, and they would have them working, 80 hours a week without paying overtime, and that's a misclassification case, and that's where you saw a lot of these lawsuits. Against brokers, car dealers, insurance agents, anybody that sort of works in a sort of production line facility. They have a fancy title, but in fact, they really are just doing rote kind of jobs.
They're not really doing decision making.
Right. But if you have someone, in a clear case of someone who's working in a convenience store, who's working 80 hours a week and getting paid, $7.67, for every hour, then that's a clear violation. The law is that if you're not an exempt employee, and the employer has an obligation to pay you minimum wage and time and a half for every hour that you work over 40 hours in every week. And if he's not doing that, then liability is really not an issue. It's just a matter of calculating the damages. And what the employees, and what generates a lot of these cases is that the employees are entitled to twice what they would have been owed. And they can go back 2 years. They can go back 2 years.
So time and a half times 2.
So let's say that they have a claim against their employer for $15,000 in overtime. Well, that becomes $30,000. And then the employer also has to pay the employee's attorney's fees. And sometimes those can be hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what the employee actually receives. There was some,
So people who are hiring ought to know that they can be held liable later if they're
up to 3
they
years
don't
if it's
understand the rules.
Right.
Up to 3 years.
Up to 3 years if it's considered willful.
We have about 4 or 5 minutes left, so time's gone pretty quickly. So I'm going to ask if there's something you want to make sure to repeat or convey to the viewers that wasn't already conveyed, that you think it's important when you're trying to select the right candidate for the job, that people know about. I'll start with
Well, I was
you,
just going
Rebecca.
to piggyback off we recommend timesheets, because if you had a scenario that we were just mentioning over here, if they don't have a timesheet and you misclassified them, they can kind of create their own hours, an employee. So you could be subjected to whatever they say are the hours that they worked. So it's really important to even have a timesheet that they're signing off on, and not just have hours, because they can go back and create them. So I was just going to mention that you might want to have them signing off on that.
Anything you want to make sure the viewer knows that didn't get
Well, as
mentioned?
a small or mid-sized employer, it's very important that you are in compliance and that you know what you're doing in a business. And any PEO relationship, whoever it is, it would be really good to kind of reach out and determine if that might work for you, because we can, offer some small services, whether it's in the human resources, guidelines to be able to help and help you establish it. A lot of times you don't have that experience, and we would.
Yeah, I would say hiring is where it starts. So, do you have a plan for the onboarding, the training, and then the retention? Because it's very expensive to terminate or to have turnover,
It's hard to
voluntary
do.
involuntary.
Hard to do.
And you start all over, and I think that's the mistake. Well, now we've got them hired, and it's almost like, uh-oh, now what do we do? So make sure you have the onboarding plan all laid out, like say from a training and development and then retention plan.
Okay.
I would say that in the hiring process, try to approach it in a neutral as fashion as you can, almost blindfolded. In other words, don't use any criteria that are illegal, even implicitly. Again, don't ask any questions about age or about sexual orientation or about disabilities, any of these issues. And then once the employee is hired, documentation is very important. Any kind of infraction, if it meets, if it's something that should be should be disciplined. Make sure you do it according to your policies and procedures manual, and you keep good records. And I would say for the employee, with overtime or wage, hours, things like that, keep your own records. If you're disciplined for something, ask them for a copy of your disciplinary form. Because someday down the road, if there is a claim of discrimination, it's always going to be he said, she said, and really whoever has the best documentation typically can win.
Sure.
And I'll add to that some of the managers have trained me in dealing with people, and I think it's really industry-wide, whether you're public or private. If you didn't document, it didn't happen. So you need to go ahead and document and do it appropriately, not in a fashion where it's a gotcha. And I think I heard Dan say something about he's going to be talking to me about a job here in the future. Yes. So that brings...
Eligible for hire?
Correct, you certainly are, I'm sure, sir, as long as you have a 4-year degree for instructional professionals. We actually welcome in to the school district, especially at our secondary level, those career changers, and we do have jobs out there, particularly in math and sciences and English language arts. So we do have an event every year. It's a recruitment event where we actually get all of our school sites together for 2 days, and they interview teachers. It's not the only way to come into the school district, but it is a good one-stop shopping to come on in and do that. So I'm hoping in a couple of years I talk to you.
And plus you need them in administration. You have a lot of people
We certainly do.
Are carrying the administrative function for schools.
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have over 200 site-based administrators, so yes, ma'am, we do. We have a lot to bring in.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming in and conveying some of your expertise in this area. And we will run websites or that information that you've provided at the end of the show. I hope viewers got a great opportunity, and we'll have this not only on our channels once or twice, but we'll also have it on our YouTube channel and put it out, streaming it on the internet. We appreciate everyone tuning in, and look forward to seeing you with the next show. Thank you.
Employers, you can search candidate resumes and research labor market information at employflorida.com.
The Tampa Bay Workforce Alliance and WorkNet Pinellas offer workforce solutions designed to improve your business.
We have worked with WorkNet since 2005. We've been able to do so much more than we would have with the support from WorkNet.
We've been able to continue to develop our education department. Our employees have recognized this as a benefit. They've named us as one of the best places to work for the past 4 years, according to the Tampa Bay Business Journal.
To learn more about our no-cost programs and services, visit workforcetampa.com or worknetpinellas.org.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Job seekers, you can upload your resume, view job postings, and research labor market information at employflorida.com.